Well, as the transgender movement ramps up, so do extreme concerns for the health of our children, quite rightly. So why, in the face of such glaring issues, do government inquiries into these so-called gender-affirming treatments keep getting knocked back? Joining us now is Liberal Senator Alex Antic. Alex, always great to see you. Before we get into the stuff, there's a story out of the States, I think you might have heard. A family where two of the boys and two of the twin girls, they've all transitioned, all of them. I'm not a doctor, so I'm not sure what the odds of that are, but there you go. I'm sure they will have happy lives. Not sure there will be many grandchildren following them. But anyway, who knows? We also learnt this week that thanks to a great friend of this show, Michael Schellenberger, about the clinician, this is in the States, who is prepared to recommend a radical double mastectomy for a 16-year-old girl already suffering from liver cancer, despite, wait for it, believing, along with the girl's surgeon and oncologist, that the cancer is probably due to the hormones she had been prescribed. This stuff, Alex, is horrific. Now, you keep trying to get your childhood transition bill up in the Australian Parliament, but it's not happening. Why not, Alex?
Yeah, Rowan, well, look, it's all tragic stuff. I read those reports and I like you, I don't seek to comment on individual cases because we don't know all the facts. But what I can say is that we have a situation now where there are something like 10 times the number of children in this country attending private gender clinics, as they're called, something like 2,000 kids in the last couple of years. That number crept up to, and it was about 200 in 2014. So this is a growing issue in this country. And one of the markers of this is we're talking about kids. We're talking about young people under 18 who can't drink, who can't get a tattoo, can't vote, can't do a whole lot of things. But when it comes to this issue, their feelings seem to be getting listened to in what are very complicated medical and, I think, emotional scenarios. I've got a bill before the Senate at the moment. It's a private senator's bill. It's been sponsored by a number of others, Matt Canavan and Ralph Babbitt, a really cross-party type bill which seeks to put a complete and utter prohibition on children under 18 being able to transition their gender. It seeks to restrain the medical community from doing so, pull funding from these clinics and hold the fort. And I think it's entirely reasonable. I mean, if you think about what we're talking about here, that particular instance you talked about, I saw the clip and the commentary was, we've listened to the kids. It's always we listen to the kids. Well, kids in a court of law, under 10, many instances, it varies between state to state, but aren't even given the opportunity to give evidence in court because the courts deem them not to have the capacity to understand the world in which they're around. What we're talking about here is putting a circuit breaker on this, and I moved for that to be sent to a hearing, a simple hearing, not even moving the bill in the last sitting week of Parliament, and the Senate rejected it. Once again, it's happened time and time again across parliaments all over this country. And at some point, politics has got to put a flag in the sand and talk about this. The left in this country do not want to talk about this issue. They say out loud that this will just embolden the hate speak. It will just somehow criticise the young kids.
And yet, Alex, I mean, the thing that we keep hearing from the left and from the pro-trans lobby or the transitioning lobby on this is this idea that, you know, any restriction puts, they say, quote, the lives of trans kids at risk. But when you look at reviews out of the United States, out of the UK, you are seeing an awful lot of cases where people have then gotten into their 20s after undergoing these treatments, having a great deal of regret and remorse for having been pushed in many cases into these treatments by the promises of doctors and by, you know, other people in the community, and they're left without reproductive function, sexual function in many cases. It would seem to me that we have to be much more honest in this country that this is an issue that cannot just be this sort of binary thing where it's portrayed as, oh, troglodytes on the right do not want to support sexual minorities, which is how this is being portrayed.
That's right. That's, of course, a completely ludicrous way to pitch it. And I mean, we're seeing these cases, the cases that you describe are now known as detransitioners. And there's a tragic case of a young woman in New South Wales that's now suing a number of different parties because of what she says was the inability to give informed consent, really about what we're talking about here. And there were the files discovered by Michael Schellenberger, I think, the WPath files recently this week, which have been produced, which which show very clearly that the medical community in this area is very, very conflicted on whether or not this is a good thing or not. We're talking about putting a freeze on this until kids are 18. It's eminently sensible, and ultimately what we are talking about is looking after the interests of kids, not playing politics with them.
Well, you're talking about saving the lives of kids and saving their futures, because we're looking at some horrific consequences of some of these treatments, some of the irreversible surgeries, and just even the hormone treatments that can have all sorts of unintended consequences. And this almost emotional blackmail that's used when this issue comes up about, well, this is going to see a surge in suicide or self-harm. And again, Michael Schellenberger, and I know there's been research out of Scandinavia as well, has completely debunked this notion that these treatments are reducing depression, self-harm, suicide. In fact, their argument is there's evidence that there's an increase in those events because of these treatments. And when these kids have regrets about having significant surgeries and treatments that change their body, change their voice, perhaps leave them infertile, they can have lifelong consequences from it.
Yeah, correct. And of course, we all have to cast our mind back to what many of us were like at 18 and younger, to thank very much so the case that we didn't brick any of that in sand, haircuts and other things being a trivial example. But I mean, it really is true. You know, we look at people, and I know there have been a number of commentators, I think even Catherine Deves has said on Twitter at some point during the course of her time that she considered herself to be a tomboy when she was a youngster, and who knows what would have happened in this environment, you know, just to use that as an example. So look, we are talking about putting a moratorium on this in order to allow children to mature, to give them the care they need, of course. I mean, we are seeing an incursion on the ability to even talk about this in some states in this country with these conversion therapy laws that stop parents and counsellors and others from even discussing this or providing care. One thing you can be assured of in life is when people don't want to talk about a subject, there's something to hide. I say, what are they trying to hide? Let's talk about it. Let's get one of these to a hearing and get the evidence from real medical professionals and the sort of things we saw out of Michael Schellenberger's research, and get them before the Australian people and let them see if they're comfortable with it.
Well, let's just briefly talk about the politics, because, Alex, you put up a bill last week to get this heard again in the Senate. I've looked through, and you thanked on Twitter those people who voted yes for your bill, and great. You know, there's Matt Canavan, as you said, and James Patterson, Holly Hughes, others. I failed to see some of your colleagues like Simon Birmingham or Andrew Bragg or Jane Hume on the yes list. Now, why are your colleagues in the Senate not supporting you? And if they're not, let me just say, right down the lens, please, if the camera can come here. Shame on you. Anyway, shame on you if you did not support. Shame on you if you did not. If you're a Liberal and you did not support Alex Antic in the Senate last week, shame on you, because this stuff is a disgrace. And as Alex is saying, the children of the future rely on you, Liberal Party, to sort this out. Alex, I know you can't slag off your colleagues. That's my job. That's why we have this show here. But why aren't the Liberal Party supporting you in this crusade? Because it is fundamental.
Well, look, I don't know the answer. That's probably a question best left for others. Suffice to say that it wasn't just a number from my side. It was also the entirety of the Labor Party and the entirety of the Greens, most of the crossbench. And some voted no, some just didn't attend the chamber, which, of course, is the other way of doing this. But once again, we're talking about having a hearing. We're talking about discussing it. We're not talking about passing the bill. The whole purpose of going to a hearing is to hammer out details, to try and take evidence from experts. And so it is a procedural matter at the end of the day. Look, I don't know. The answer is probably, or the question is probably better put to others, I would say, Rowan.
Yeah, OK. Well, I think the point is, if the Liberals aren't supporting you on this, shame on them. Every individual not involved. You expect Labor, you expect the Greens not to support this. Rita.
Well, absolutely. And we have seen in North America, we have seen in Europe, from Scandinavia to the UK and elsewhere, a complete rethink in this area where they have done reviews, thorough reviews, and realised they were doing harm to these poor, confused kids, and there's a better way of carrying out these treatments. Okay, and in Australia, there's no transparency. We can't even get clear data on precisely what's happening, what's the youngest age where a double mastectomy has been performed. For gender-affirming care.
Senator Alex Antic, we've got to go, but thank you so much for coming on Outsiders, explaining that to us. And the people of South Australia, as well as the people of Australia, owe you so much for actually pursuing this issue. It is critical to future generations, and we applaud you for doing so, and we trust the rest of the Liberal Party and the rest of the Parliament get behind you. Senator Alex Antic, always great to have you here on Outsiders. Thank you.